So we're just going to go over two of what I'm calling the competing ethical systems today. Keep in mind, yesterday is how a Roman Catholic would approach a moral judgment. So just keep in mind, we look at the object. What is a person doing first? If it's an intrinsic evil, we've already made our judgment. We will not do good. We will not do evil that good may come of it. If the object is good, we're going to go look at the intention next. Because we do care, what is the motive or intention behind. If that's good, we'll look at the circumstances. If they're all good, we'll say this is a good moral act. If any one of those are not, then we'll say, no, this is not an illicit act. All right? These are going to be different approaches. So we will look at proportionalism and consequentialism. I'll give you what I'm calling somebody who's affiliated with that particular ethical system. I'm also only giving you a very surface understanding of it. There are many variations on these. So if, in the future you take an ethics class or a critical thinking class and you hear these again and it sounds a little different, at this level, all I can do is give you a one-slide introduction to it. I can't talk about all the variations of it. So anyway, keep that in mind also. The first one is proportionalism. What they do here is this ethic will weigh out the good and the evil in any particular situation. Okay? So in order to determine what an action is whether illicit or illicit, if you want a visual, think of like a balance scales. All right? You're going to take all the goods that you see and place them on one side of the scale, and you're going to take all the evils that you perceive and place them on the other side of the scale. Whichever side drops, that's your decision. If you find more evil in what's going to occur, then you don't do it. If you're finding more good, then you will do it. Now, this has to do with moral acts. We do this all the time, but not with moral acts. If I were to say, look, the last day of this quarter, let's do something here. What do you guys think you want? Pizza, ice cream? Okay, we would make choices and we would go proportionally to what the majority wanted. That's not the same thing here. That's not a moral act to choose between pizza and ice cream, okay? Although maybe it is. I think pizza should win. But nonetheless, it's not a moral act. Jeremy Bentham is an individual who's associated with this ethical system. So what they're going to look for is the maximum happiness for everybody affected. All right? The maximum happiness for everyone affected. They will maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Now you might be thinking, well, but that's not a half bad deal. Well, okay. Then you would never have a child. And even if you got through the pain of having a child, that's the easy part, right? As that child grows, there's going to be a lot of things that will be sacrifices in your life that, although you endure them willingly, they are not all pleasures, okay? So there are many things I look back on with my daughters, and I'm glad that I had them in cheerleading. I'm glad that I had them do this, but I do not look back and think sitting in a bleacher for 7 hours on a Sunday was anything pleasurable, right? Even though I'm glad to do it for them. So did anybody ever see the TV show was on a few years ago with Gene Simmons, the singer from Kiss? No?
Oh, yeah, like the reality one.
Yeah, it was a reality show. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, if somebody says, I'm only after pleasure and no pain, that you don't need to write it down, but that's known as hedonism, right? But hedonism has its limits, because a person who drinks so much in an evening is going to have a headache tomorrow, so did you count on that pain? A person who is going to try to have an affair with a woman that he finds attractive might find out that the husband has something to say about that. So Gene Simmons would call himself an Epicurean hedonist, because the Epicurean part would say, look, I'm not after pleasure if it's going to bring me future pains, right? So we're not talking about something crass like that here. They're trying to weigh out ethical systems, all right? Or in this ethical system, they're trying to weigh it out. So the method they use is simple. They are going to compare and evaluate all the possibilities available for a particular moral choice. They are going to compare and evaluate all the possibilities available for a particular moral choice. So a person would sit down and try to make a decision whether or not they're going to cheat. Okay? They would have to consider, what if I get caught? Well, if I get caught, he's probably just going to give me half points. But I don't really know much now, so I'm not going to really get much better this way, so I might as well cheat. Because even the bad stuff isn't that bad compared to what I might gain.
Available for areas.
Sorry, say that again?
Available for areas.
For a particular moral choice, okay? Possibilities available for particular moral choice. Now, there are issues with this, okay? The first criticism, and I just bring a couple up for each of these. It does not recognize an objective good, all right? So is what I'm choosing in itself a good thing? Not just something I desire. Is an objective good and intrinsic evil? So it does not recognize objective goods or intrinsic evils. There are some things, as we said yesterday, that if they are the object of the act, if it's racism, if it's murder, if it's injustice to human persons, then those are evils. We will not do them. Scripture says you should not do evil that good may come from it. This doesn't really consider that. It's just weighing it out. So objective good and intrinsic evils aren't something, they might get thrown in the mix, right? They might be weighed out with everything else, but they don't carry more weight. This last part is really the biggest problem with proportionalism. How do you measure different pleasures and pain? I mean, how would I measure the pleasure that I might get from getting a good grade on a test to what pain am I causing? Maybe somebody thinks I'm a cheat. So how do I put a number on the reputation I might have as a cheater, or if anybody even cares about that, compared to the score that I can get if I do cheat? And how do you weigh those things out? I mean, you have a hard time. You can't quantify everything, right? Life is not math. We can't assign a number to everything. I don't know what your love weighs, all right? So how much is your love, or maybe the scandal I might cause if you knew that I cheat, how do I put that on a scale? Now let me give you like a scenario that can really illustrate this. And I'm sorry that I don't know the specifics. I read a lot, and I sometimes forget where I read things. And this is one I tried the other day to search for it, and I couldn't. But I remember reading the story. I'll get most of it right. This fishing village down in South America, the people lived in what we would probably call abject poverty. They barely had enough to feed their families, but they did. You know, they were content. So they fished. That was their income, their source of income. And they fished around 14 hours a day. What was happening, though, is that there was a coral reef off the coast where they were fishing. And their fishing was depleting whatever was necessary to maintain that coral reef. So the international community, ecologists and environmentalists said, how do we preserve this, coral reef? We can't tell people to stop fishing, right? That's their livelihood. So they got an idea. They got funds together, and they went there and they established a pineapple plantation for them. So each family was given so much, acreage, and they planted the pineapple trees. And they taught them how to harvest. So there was a couple of good things. And if you're weighing the goods and the bads, okay, so here were two good things. They were now able to, instead of working 14 hours a day, they only worked 9 hours a day. That's a deal, right? And actually, because they weren't fishing and the pineapple industry was doing well, they were making 30 to 40% more. So could you imagine if somebody said, how'd you like to work 5 hours less and make 30% more? It's a win-win, right? So they did it. Everything went well for a little bit until they realized the coral reef was still being destroyed. Guess what the people did with the extra 5 hours they had a day? They went fishing. They never knew that. How could they have, now if somebody would have told them that, Hey, you're going to, see, they thought they were Western capitalists. Hey, we're going to, instead of working 14 hours a day, we're going to let you work 9, and then we're going to make more money. They thought they'd either invest it or work more and make even more money and buy other plantations. But these people were quite content with their life. So they would work 9 hours a day, make 30% more, and in their spare time, we can go fishing. So how would you have known that? So you didn't weigh it. So it turns out that proportionalism could not have worked well in that situation. All right? Anyway. Consequentialism. Here, you're looking for a good end, a good consequence, hence the name, consequentialism. The ethic states that the rightness of an act is determined solely by the goodness of the consequence. So I'll give you an extreme example, one that they probably wouldn't agree with, but it's an extreme. About 4 or 5 years ago, somebody, their friend had got shot in Reading for his sneakers. Okay? Well, a couple of the kids knew him. So, what's the big deal? The guy got his sneakers. He wanted his sneakers. Well, the deal is that if you're going to evaluate an ethical act simply by the goodness of the consequence, then you'll really do anything to get to that. Okay? That could be an issue. Well, it is an issue. John Stuart Mill, On Liberty, he wrote a book. He's a proponent of consequentialism. So what they say is we have to maximize the good consequences. We're looking to have the best outcome, right? So if we wanted here at Berks Catholic to raise our GPA, some of you worked very hard to get 95s. Not everybody gets 95s. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bring the lower rung up and give them 20 points. You might complain about that. But we'll say, yeah, but isn't it better for all of us if it looks like everybody's doing that well in this school? You might cry foul. I worked for my grade, they were given that grade. Yeah, but it's better for the most of us, right? In the end, it's a good consequence. We're going to be known as the school that, can churn out academics. So I think overall it's good. Okay, that would be an application. So the end justifies the means. The end, having such high scores, colleges just drool over our students. The means, well, we kind of flubbed it to get there, but what the heck? Still, we're getting these kids into college, So, end justifies the means. The method they will use is that they won't consider the morality of the means. How I got there, hurting an individual for their sneakers, have an unjust grading policy to get everybody's grades up. We're not looking at that. We know we did that. We don't care. It's the happiness that's going to result as the product of it. So, in the end, whoever did shoot that young man was happy because he now had those sneakers. The people in this school that now can rightly say, look at the grades our students have, they're happy because we artificially inflated 2/3 of everybody's grade. So we're looking at the end. We're not looking at how we got there. The criticisms with this is unlike our system where we are trying to say first, what are we doing? And then we do ask why. Those don't really fall into this. Here we're just looking as to what's the end result. Will I get a good result? If I do, well then whatever I need to do to get there. Here's an example scenario. Let's say we have a girl in school that she is the best in field hockey. I mean, she's going to go to one of the top schools in the nation and play college, full scholarship in field hockey. She wants to be a doctor. So this scholarship will allow her to go to school, get into a pre-med system, and then she's awfully smart and a very good hockey player. She'll wind up going on to med school, and her goal is that she works in the poorer communities so that she can get people who can't afford health insurance. So we have a really good person here. She got pregnant, it's March. Now what does she do? She have an abortion? See, Roman Catholic says, it's intrinsic evil. So a proportionalist might weigh it all out and say, well, she is going to help the poor. Maybe we should take that into consideration. She is a bright person, so how many people is she going to be able to help if one unborn child dies? They'll weigh it out. The consequentialist, this is a no-brainer. You don't blow that. You're going to go to college for free, abort the child. They don't even consider it, right? So a person who, in other words, brings that thought to that scenario would be a consequentialist. Here's the thing, though. It's not always possible to predict future consequences, right? I mean, we don't know that all those things are going to happen. Even if you were to say the end justifies the means, do you really know? The intention of the moral act is disregarded. They don't even ask why a person is doing what they're doing. Why are you doing that? The Roman Catholic method here is we're going to ask why. It's not primary, right? I mean, you can't have a great intention if you're doing something evil, but we still are interested in the intention. If the intention is not good, then we can't do this moral act, right? Like if somebody says, I love children, I can't wait to have a children. Look, I'm pregnant. That's wonderful. So you had sexual, relations with your husband. You have a child. The circumstances are you're married, that you have enough income to care for this child, that you're all healthy. What's her intention? I'd like to, carry this for somebody else, so I'm actually going to give this away when I'm done. So you're not bringing a child into the world that you will then bring them into the family. You're doing this so that you can sell as a surrogate. No, that's wrong then, all right? By the way, that would change the object too. That becomes surrogacy and not pregnancy, but nonetheless, okay? So the intention of the moral act is disregarded. So that's it for now. What we'll do tomorrow is we'll look at situational ethics and deontology, and then we'll look at so-called one case study.